Ladies and gentlemen, this is the real Rambo, Roy Benevidez, the Green Beret that took on an army with just a knife. I saw the first portion of this, obviously up to this point, and yeah, obviously the action part is gonna come now. But so far the story has been really interesting about the psychological element of him behind, like how things happen, how he was always like a angry guy who like always looked for a fight and things like that. Uh, Sometimes it's just like feels effed up, right? Like how some of the great heroes and badass people's background stories somehow really sad, but that sadness is what like pushes them to be great in a way. I mean, it can go either way depending on, I guess, events that happen in your life. At least that's what psychological element of it. Psychology is not 100%, but that's very interesting. Like always some kind of like angry child molded into something like a brave and badass hero type of way, right? So I'm guessing the real Rambo, who was inspired by the guy who inspired Rambo in the first place, which is like, okay, it's gonna be interesting. So let's continue this.
Now, they have two options. They can punch through the front line, fight through all the American defenses to deliver these supplies. Doesn't sound like a very good time. Or they could cheat. They could just cut right over into Laos and then travel through this neutral territory with no resistance, and then travel into Cambodia, more neutral territory with no resistance, penetrate way past all the American front lines, deep into South Vietnam, and then cut back in and drop off all the supplies. Okay, and to be fair, that's a brilliant plan, because there's not a whole lot America can do to stop it, right? Because the only thing America really can do is to send their troops into Cambodia and Laos, and that's not going to be a very popular idea, considering that most of America's mad that they're in Vietnam in the first place. They're definitely not going to support invading two more countries. So if America wants to stop this, the only thing they can do is to send their own guys
They're
into this neutral
mad.
territory.
American people are mad. That is an understatement, right? How many songs and hippie shit came out during that time? Obviously, drugs helped, but American people didn't like that America invaded Vietnam. It doesn't matter the reasoning, right? Even if they try to sell the reason like we are fighting communism, this and that, they didn't care. So that is putting, like, if they tried to invade another country, that would have been the tipping point.
Territory where they're not supposed to be to cut off this supply line. And then, even if they do run into each other in this neutral territory, it just turns into the Spider-Man meme, right? Hey, you're not supposed to be here. No, you're not supposed to be here. And then everybody's just as guilty of breaking the same rules. It's a really good plan on their part. Okay, but here's the problem with this whole thing. America cares a lot more about not getting caught in these neutral territories than the North Vietnamese do. Because of this, the Americans are only sending in very, very small groups of men, like 12 guys or less, whereas the North Vietnamese are sending in entire companies. They're sending in hundreds of guys. So this makes it impossible for the Americans to directly confront the North Vietnamese. So rather than confronting them, they start stalking them. They start tracking them down and following them, writing down what their most commonly used paths are, what they're dropping off, where they're dropping it off. They try to memorize all their different routes. They try to figure out anything and everything they can about their operations inside of Laos and Cambodia. So that goes on for a while, and then somebody gets the bright idea of,
So is it democracy? American democracy is the reason why America always have to like improvise at one of the most brilliant level, right? Because of democracy and ethics in general. Let's just say because of democracy. Like USL usually fights like authoritarian type of things or like close to that. Communism, Soviet Union, basically something like that, right? So obviously in this case, North Vietnamese don't care about anything. Like they're fucking neutral, not neutral, I don't care. Americans have to worry about it. So like they have to find like ways around it. That's how all American stories go. Like our hands were like tied behind our back. We need to improvise. We need to work around the democracy to really win it. Usually when a situation like this arrives in the past, people usually get their ass kicked. But one thing about Americans is that they always find a way around, right? It's not like things like this has existed in the past. Good guy, bad guy, democracy, freedom versus like authoritarianism. Usually authoritarianism kind of wins because they don't have to worry about things like anything, like ethics and things. So that has always been the case, right? That's why you can hear about like major names that were like dominant because they didn't care. In America's case, America is the dominant one, but America is the one who's like have to think about the ethics and everything. America is the one with democracy and things, which is like always surprise. All the like things they have to think around things is always so brilliant.
hey, we know where all the enemy's ammunition is. What if we just snuck in a bunch of defective ammunition that blew up when they tried to fire it? And then it would not only, A, take care of some of the enemy troops that got messed up from, you know, a howitzer round blowing up or ammunition blowing up or
Definitely by the book.
and they go and try to get into a firefight, then the Americans are guaranteed to win. There's that aspect, but then there's also the psychological aspect of the enemy isn't going to trust their own supply line anymore. So then that goes on for a little while.
Who does that? I mean, seriously.
The North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong figure out that the Americans are doing this, so they start sending out their best guys, their equivalent of MAC-VSOG, and they send them out into these neutral territories to try to hunt and kill the American MAC-VSOG operators. Because of that, the MAC-VSOG casualty rate goes up, and at one point, it was actually reported as being a 100% casualty rate. If you were in MAC-VSOG during this era, there was a 100% likelihood that you were going to get injured or killed in the line of duty. A Purple Heart to these guys was just a rite of passage. So MAC-VSOG starts taking more casualties, they realize they're being hunted, then they start doing countermeasures to prevent from being...
The respect to Vietnamese, right? Like if they can do that to best of the best, right? And also like one of that Vietnam video that I saw very recently from Federation talked about those cave system and whatever, like Vietnam War, jungle warfare is just insanity.
Being caught. They're having helicopters go in and pretend to drop off a bunch of operators when they're actually not doing it, basically spamming them. That way, when they actually do go behind the line, the enemy's not going to know whether that was a fake drop-off or a real drop-off. So that's what's happening. There's like this shadow war going on in the neutral territories of Cambodia and Laos, and this is what's happening when Roy shows up. So 2 weeks into being there, Roy goes out on a mission, and one of the guys, if he's with, ends up getting shot up, and they have to get this guy medevaced. But they're still being attacked, so they can't go out in the open so a helicopter can land. So the helicopter has to drop what's called a McGuire rig. It's basically just a rope that these guys are going to hook onto, and they're going to pull them straight up out of the canopy of the jungle and fly off with them dangling underneath the helicopter like some badass Pinocchio. Now, usually when you do this, like you can see in this picture, you're stacked on top of one another on the same nylon rope. But for some reason on this day, they dropped 2 nylon ropes. Roy hooked the other guy that's injured up to one, and he hooked himself up to the other. And Roy probably didn't even realize that there was 2 ropes. He just saw a bunch of nylon rope everywhere. He hooked both of them up, and they were going to take off. So they get pulled up out of the canopy. They take off headed towards camp, but because they're each on a different rope, the ropes end up getting crossed and the nylon ropes start rubbing together. And when nylon rubs up against nylon,
I was about to say that it's gonna do that, spin thing and yeah, basically how you fly kite. We have a kite festival here called Uttarayan. This is the concept behind it, right? Like cutting each other kites. It's a warfare. I know all you people outside, like in like Western countries, fly kite and it's like cute, right? Everybody's like, hey, look at my kite. It's a warfare here, right? Skies littered with kites, right? And it's like there are like glass pieces in the like rope and everything just to make it more like I don't know, like something that can just like one shot everything type of way. It's a warfare. It's a different thing. But yeah, something like that. You could literally cut it off.
Melts because it's plastic. So these ropes are going to end up snapping, and Roy and his buddy are both going to fall to their death unless they can land and get this figured out, and they can't land because they're still being shot at. Now, luckily for Roy and the other guy, the belly man in that helicopter was another one of Roy's friends, a sergeant by the name of Leroy Wright, and he noticed what was going on, and he ties himself off to a third rope and lowers himself out of the helicopter in between the other 2 nylon ropes.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm thinking of Tropic Thunder. You know that movie? I don't know why I'm just imagining that, right? I'm just imagining crazy shit right now.
Allowing his body weight to untangle the ropes as he lowered himself down, saving all 3 of them. 2 days after that, Roy wakes up in his cot. Time to go get breakfast. He heads off towards the chow hall. He's making his way there, and everything just starts scrambling. There's radio transmissions coming in saying it's a Daniel Boone tactical emergency. Daniel Boone is the name of the operation in Cambodia. You're not supposed to be saying that over the radio, period, which means that shit has really hit the fan somewhere. Everybody around him starts scrambling. Helicopters start going out, and helicopters start coming back in, all shot up with injured men on them. And Roy goes up to one of these helicopters trying to figure out what's going on. And the door gunner in this helicopter falls out, and it's a 19-year-old kid that Roy remembered they just celebrated his birthday like a week ago, and this kid falls into Roy's arms and dies on the spot. Roy asks the rest of the helicopter crew what's going on, what's happening, and they tell him that
fuck, man. Seriously, I felt that Federation's ability to like really make you feel about some situation is insane. This feels Hollywood-esque, right? They were like celebrating his birthday, and just like week later, like he literally falls into arm and dies. This is insane.
The team out there that's getting overrun by hundreds of NVA. So Roy continues to ask him, what team? Who's out there? Did you pick them up? Are they here now? What's going on? And they go, no, we couldn't get close enough to pick these guys up. They were so overrun and we were taking too much fire from the helicopters. We don't know who it was, but it was the big black dude that saved you the other day. And Roy immediately knows they're talking about Leroy, and his entire team is still out there. So Roy asks them, are you going back out there? And they said, yeah, we're going to go back out there, but we're not going to be able to land. The only thing we're going to be able to do is drop ammunition out of the helicopter above them so they have ammunition to keep fighting. And to Roy Benevidez, it sounds an awful lot like somebody needs help. And with that, he runs over, grabs his medical bag, jumps in the helicopter.
Parachute.
And they take off. A couple minutes into the flight there, Roy realizes that in his hurry to run and grab his aid bag so that he could help, he made a mistake. A really, really big mistake. He forgot his gun.
God damn it!
He is now in a helicopter flying into combat with no gun, no food, no water, no grenades. He literally has an 8-inch recon knife and his aid bag, and that is it. Despite that, Roy is still determined to help these guys. So they get there, they drop the ammunition out of the side of the helicopter on top of these guys, and then they fly off. And Roy says, get me as close as you can and land this helicopter so I can jump out. And they get him like 150 yards away from where this team is injured and pinned down. And Roy...
Yeah, I was just imagining like 2 knives in the mouth and 2 knives in the hands, and he's gonna jump out. Like Gurkhas, basically. Right? The Nepalis. Did Federation make a video about Gurkhas? Right? Because I know about a story, like an Indian officer was talking about it. Like somebody was saying that, okay, we are gonna like fly at certain level and then all of you gonna jump out. He was talking about some operations, like who wanna sign up for that, and like few hands like went up in the like of the all soldiers, and only people's hand were up was like Gurkhas, right? And nobody else put the hand up. And he's like, why the fuck didn't none of you like put the hand up? And they're like, you're gonna have parachute, you're not gonna jump out without a parachute. Then like, then everybody puts their hand up. Which means Gurkhas thought there is no parachute. They're still ready to jump out. That's the level of craziness that's working there. So I was just like, imagining that level of shit. Like he's like, fuck it, I'm just gonna with a knife, I'm gonna jump into fight. Especially when the title says he's gonna fight with a knife.
Roy jumps out of the helicopter and starts running towards them. He makes it 10 steps, gets shot, drops him. He got shot in the leg. He tells himself that he tripped and landed on a thorn bush, and he's not actually shot, but he knows he's shot. He keeps running towards him, and he makes it another 50 yards, and he gets shot again. This time, it's a glancing blow to his helmet. He doesn't know that yet. Maybe he got shot in the head. Maybe he didn't. Maybe it was shrapnel. He has no idea. He'll figure it out.
The adrenaline, man.
So he just keeps running to the team, and he finally ends up making it to him. So he makes it to where the team is pinned down. They're all spread out, way too far out. They're not in a defensive position. They're running out of ammunition. Every single person there is shot, blown up. Everybody is in horrible shape. So Roy gets to work. He picks up an AK-47 off a dead NVA soldier as he runs to each individual team member, giving them morphine, whatever medical aid he can, and then dragging them over to this anthill, this big pile of dirt, to get them in this defensive position where they're actually semi-close together and they can start fighting back. Roy ends up making it to the guy with the radio, and he's like, this is Tango Mike, I've still got men on the ground. I need to get these guys medevaced. I have green smoke grenades. I'll pop them so you know where we're at. While the helicopters are on their way, Roy keeps going and getting more guys and dragging them back to the anthill, giving himself and everybody else morphine. The helicopters finally show up. The door gunners lay down suppressing fire, and Roy starts loading up the guys at the anthill onto the helicopter, but he still has more men out towards the bush line that he hasn't been able to make it to yet. So he gets all the guys on the helicopter, and then he tells the door gunner, hey, we still have men over there. Cover me. And Roy takes off running next to the helicopter as the helicopter is gliding next to him, and him and the door gunner are returning fire into the wood line, trying to make it to the other men. So Roy and the helicopter make it to the last guy that Roy knows of, and it's not Leroy. So he asks this guy, where's Leroy at? And that
Okay,
guy,
this situation is so badass that even helicopter is like agreeing. So that even the helicopter guy is badass. Because I feel like in normal situation, the helicopter guy would be like, we can't put everybody into danger. That feels like too much of risk. I'm gonna pull out or some shit like that. Or some kind of a protocol or something, right? That's how usually it goes. Like right now we are at like higher risk. I'm doing like suppressing fire. We can't wait for you to run and find other people. I'm gonna pull out or some shit like that. He didn't do that. He's like, okay, I'm gonna glide with you. Just provide suppressing fire. It's just insane.
points him towards the wood line and says he got hit back there and he's got a bunch of confidential classified information on him. So Roy decides that he's going to go get it. He takes off running towards where this guy pointed him out in the wood line, but the helicopter can't follow because it can't get that close to the trees. So the helicopter door gunner continues to lay suppressing fire while Roy runs into the tree line and finds Leroy's body. He gets all the classified intel off Leroy's body and then he begins dragging Leroy's corpse towards the helicopter because he at least wants to bring his friend's body home. And then he gets shot in the back. As we all know, it's always darkest right before the dawn, but as we also all know, sometimes it's darkest right before it gets even fucking darker. After being shot, Roy turns around, realizing...
Yeah, darkest before dawn only applies to portion of the whole thing. For the most people, it's the darkest before it's done, right? That's how reality is. All these stories Federation tells you feels very Hollywood-esque, and you're just like thinking, okay, something good's gonna come in the end, but not necessarily.
He's not going to be able to bring his friend's body back with him and starts running towards the helicopter. And then he sees the helicopter pilot get shot through the window as the helicopter spins out of control and crashes. Roy makes it to the crash site, and everybody there that survived is pretty much ready to call it a day. They've accepted the fact that they're about to die, and Roy hasn't. He starts dragging everybody, getting them away from the burning helicopter and getting...
What the fuck, man? So the thing I was thinking of kinda did happen. Helicopter did get shot down. There's a reason those protocols are there, so everybody don't go down. So yeah, so your bravery doesn't get paid off all the time. Basically, that's what that was. That is so fucked up.
Them into another defensive position so that they can fight back. He's going and getting AK-47s off of dead NVA soldiers, getting these guys guns. He has guys that can't even see. They're missing eyes, and he's just telling them, shoot that way. Under Roy's leadership, they start fighting back, and Roy starts calling in airstrikes, F-111s, F-4 Phantoms, gunships, anything and everything they have, and they just start bombing this tree line with all they've got, and they do it over and over, but the enemy soldiers just keep coming and coming. There's literally hundreds of them. And this goes on for hours. It's too hot for them to get a helicopter in there to load people up. And every time they bomb the tree line, more enemy soldiers run out of it towards Roy and his crew. And it gets to the point that they're literally using the dead bodies of soldiers as sandbags to stop bullets. Roy and the men on the ground don't realize it at this point in time, but the crew's up in the gunships that are mowing down...
Oh my god. This is Fallout level of shit, like grimness, right? Fallout is great at portraying, but even Fallout doesn't do that. Like, I'm just imagining the scenario. People are missing their eyes, but somehow still have to shoot. Commotion is all around, like people are literally piling bodies as sandbag. That is such a grim sight. That alone could break your spirit. Just seeing that, like, okay, we are fucked now. That is so...
the forests that the enemies are coming from are starting to mow down so much vegetation that they're starting to see straight lines, which don't occur naturally in nature. These are bunkers with fortified machine gun positions. The MACV SOG team didn't just stumble across an entire battalion of men. They walked right into an entire NVA base inside of Cambodia. Eventually, the air crews come to the realization that with this base there's got to be at least 1,000 men, an entire battalion there, and there's a road where they can bus in even more men for reinforcements. They're not going to be able to keep this up and get Roy and everybody else to be alive and handle this the right way. So the only thing that they can do is to have a carpet bomb of that forest, and at the exact same moment that those bombs start dropping, they're going to send in the helicopters to try to pick up Roy and everybody else. So a group of A-37 super tweets bomb the tree line as a Huey comes down, and Roy starts helping to load these men into the helicopter. Some of them have lost so much blood they can't even pick themselves up. And while this is happening, the North Vietnamese soldiers rush them. They're coming straight towards the helicopter. They're firing. Roy's trying to load the men on while firing back. The door gunner's returning fire, and one of them ends up making it to Roy, and for some reason, whether he was out of ammo or whether he was trying to take an American alive, he hits Roy in the back of the head with the buttstock of his rifle. Roy falls down, and then he swings it again at Roy's face, dislocating his jaw. Roy, somehow still conscious, gets up, starts trying to wrestle this guy to the ground. He lost his gun. All he has is his recon knife, and this guy's got his rifle with a bayonet on it. And the enemy soldier goes to lunge at Roy with the bayonet, ends up cutting Roy's arm, and then Roy lunges at him, misses. The enemy soldier lunges back. He ends up stabbing Roy in the stomach with the bayonet, and Roy ends up getting to him with the recon knife, stabbing him in the chest and killing him. Roy pulls out the bayonet, can't get his recon knife out of this guy's chest, and he's now holding his intestines in his stomach with one hand. At this point, Roy's right next to the helicopter, and he's looking right at it. He should get...
Oh, gut damage, intestine damage is the worst kind of damage you can have because it's slow, it's painful. You might not die fast, maybe you have time. Every waking second is gonna be fucked up. Oh god. This is too gruesome, man. This is all grim. Oh my god. Seriously, the level of intensity the North Vietnamese soldiers showed there. Usually, if you're like out of ammo or something, you try to like revert back or like go to defensive position or something. He literally rushed him with like, I'm gonna slam him with my gun if nothing else. That's some next level shit. So determination from there is also insane.
Get in the helicopter, but he turns around away from the helicopter, and there's 2 Americans still out there returning fire that are able to fight. They're just not able to walk, and Roy runs towards them. Roy gets there, picks up the one that can't walk entirely, and starts helping to drag him towards the helicopter, and the other guy can't crawl, but he can't walk, so he literally starts walking on his knees using an AK-47 like it's a crutch. They get to the helicopter. Roy helps load them in the helicopter, grabs the AK-47 that the guy was using as a crutch, turns around again and starts shooting at NVA soldiers that are charging towards the helicopter as the injured men behind him literally grab Roy and drag him into the helicopter as they take off. As it becomes clear to absolutely everyone that Roy Benevidez did not just bring a knife to a gunfight, the communists brought an army to a Roy Benevidez fight and still couldn't win. After saving all the surviving members of the original MACV-SOG team and the first helicopter crew, through 6 hours of combat, Roy has sustained over 37 different life-threatening injuries, multiple gunshots.
6 hours. Can you work out for 1.5 hours? Imagine that. When you were last in gym, like posting Instagram photos and whatever the Facebook shit you're doing, with that level of like slow pace, even then, what, like hour, 1.5 hour? These guys are in intense fight for 6 hours, where they have to run around, like shoot, like put people on the shoulder just to like save them, having injuries, getting stabbed in the gut and still like saving these people. This guy is insane, right? It's just like 6 hours. I mean, damn.
Wounds, over 20 shrapnel wounds. He has been bayoneted and he has been clubbed. And after being dragged into the helicopter, he finally loses consciousness.
Just a flesh wound.
His next memory is being literally waist deep inside of a body bag as an American medic is zipping it up. His eyes are caked with blood and he can't open them. He can't talk to the medic because his jaw is dislocated and he's lost so much blood that he can't move. And from the medic's perspective, he doesn't even realize that Roy's an American because he's Hispanic, he's got the same skin tone as the North Vietnamese, and Roy's body is literally laying on top of 3 dead NVA soldiers that in Roy's fog of morphine and adrenaline, he loaded into the helicopter because he didn't want to leave anybody behind. Roy can literally feel the teeth on the zipper closing as it gets closer and closer to his head, and once the zipper reaches his neck, somebody stops the medic and says, "Hold on, that's Benevidez," and he instructs the medic to double check and make sure that Roy is actually dead. And the medic argues with him, and Roy's buddy says, "I don't care, double check." And the medic zips down the body bag a little bit and puts his hand on Roy's chest and leans forward to listen and see if he can hear breathing. And at this moment, Roy takes what he describes as the best shot he's ever made in his entire life. He spits directly in that medic's face.
Give him that huck to it.
And with that, they get Roy out of the body bag, they get him in the aid station, and they start trying to do everything they can for him, but they're all...
Seriously, that clip has blown up recently. What the fuck is that? I'm glad Fracturation is getting into that one as well. There you go. Man, this is so fucked up, man. Like, your eyes are like... Oh, I was imagining he's gonna go all Undertaker there, basically. As soon as he zips on, like, put the hand out. But like he said, like, too much blood loss, he can't do that. That would have been too badass. But yeah, that friend, if he just, like, got depressed in that moment, thinking, oh, Benevidez is dead. I mean, that's it, walked away. He would have been literally carried out at that point and would have died, right? Simple moment, one simple decision can change everything.
Almost positive that he's not going to make it. After his chain of command figured out everything that had happened and that Roy was pretty much the only reason that the 8 other men that survived made it out of there alive, immediately got him signed up to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. The only reason they didn't try to get him the Medal of Honor on the spot was because they didn't think Roy was going to survive, and they wanted to get him an award that they could give him in the field so that he could receive it before he passed away. But Roy Benevidez had other plans. he doesn't pass away. Instead, he recovers. And not only does he recover, he yet again refuses to get med boarded out of the Army into a medical retirement and continues to serve an additional 10 years in the United States Army.
Imagine like Benevidez, we were gonna do the Medal of Honor, but like we wanted to give you proper medal before you die, and like die, fuck that shit, and just like stands up and walk away. I got stabbed in the. I was literally holding my guts and loaded people inside the helicopter, right? Somebody gets like a tear in the muscle and they don't get out of like fucking bed. I was stabbed and like grabbing people, putting them on my shoulder and loading them up in the helicopter. This is all next level shit.
And during that time, they try to get him awarded the Medal of Honor because if anybody deserves it, it's this guy, right? But for some reason or another, it always ends up getting rejected, and it gets rejected again and again.
Hate
over
this
and
shit.
over. They just keep rejecting his Medal of Honor. But there's nothing that Roy or anybody else could do. For some reason or another, the committee in charge of awarding the Medal of Honor simply did not want to give Master Sergeant Roy Benevidez the award that he had earned. So he did the only thing he could do. He just kept on keeping on. So he went on.
This feels like Oscars all over again. Like, what's the point of the fucking medal if you can't give that medal to people like this? At that point, like, you're hurting the integrity of the medal rather than hurting guy like Roy, right? Every time I see factories and video, there's always some political bullshit between some a-hole committee behind the office walls or something who decides to do shit like this. It just pisses me off, man. All the shit this guy did, if he can't get Medal of Honor, who's gonna do it? Like 8 people are alive because of him. That's not Medal of Honor worthy.
Served throughout the military until 1976 before finally retiring as Master Sergeant Benevidez, the recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. As Roy retires, there was another press push about how incredible he was, wondering why he didn't earn the Medal of Honor, and this ends up connecting him with one of the men that he had saved that Roy actually thought had died. And this man gets a hold of Roy almost 12 years after the fact, and he tells Roy that he's going to write up everything that he witnessed and send it into this committee again. And yet again, even despite all this new information, the committee in charge of awarding the Medal of Honor,
I think because of his, because of his like Hispanic thing, because he looked like he said like North Vietnamese, because of his like skin color and how he looked like North Vietnamese, and I think that's what they thought, like we can't give him the Medal of Honor, which is like weird. It's one of your people, right? Nobody's gonna think of like he looks like North Vietnamese or shit. Nobody's gonna think that. They're gonna think like, oh, some badass guy did badass thing and like boost morale. When you give like Medal of Honor, his story is gonna get out. People are gonna hear about it, and that's gonna boost morale if anything else. I guess this was one of those times like no war, right? Say, what is that song, right? War, what is it for, right? That song. So even for the badass people and veterans, average people didn't care much because they saw all that as bad. I guess that was the reason. I don't know. This is all my guesses. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
rejected it again. And then they realized what they were doing wrong. They were telling the whole truth. They were saying that Roy hopped in a helicopter, flew into Cambodia, and helped save a bunch of MACV-SOG members. And as far as the US government's concerned at this point in time, up until like the mid-80s, MACV-SOG, A, doesn't exist, and B, if it did, it definitely would not be operating in a neutral territory like Laos or Cambodia, because that was against the
What the fuck? He did what? You want to try that again? What team was he in? I just saw again, what? Just like hint. I'm putting emphasis on like his team. Do you want to change the name of that? What you talking about? What's this team? Like, there you go. Yeah, okay.
the rules.
I can neither confirm nor deny details of any operation without the Secretary's approval.
So the politicians and the bureaucrats in charge realize that if they give Roy the Medal of Honor for saving MACV-SOG members in Cambodia, which wasn't supposed to be happening, there could be political backlash, and they're not going to metaphorically stick their necks on the line just to give Roy what he deserves, despite the fact that Roy put...
This is basically Call of Duty Black Ops or Modern Warfare level shit. You don't exist. Doesn't matter how bravery you do, you're not going to get any applause or any medal for it. And if you get captured, we're not going to come for it. Not the last part, but still. It feels like Black Ops level.
His entire life on the line for them. So bearing this in mind, they redo all the paperwork, they jump through all the hoops to try to get Roy the Medal of Honor again, and this time, rather than saying that Roy's courageous actions occurred in Cambodia, they simply said that they happened to the west of Lock-In Airfield, which was where Roy was stationed. They just didn't bother to say how far west. And wouldn't you know it, It gets approved. Roy Benevidez receives the Medal of Honor in 1981 from President Ronald Reagan, 15 years after the fact. After getting what he had earned, he finally gets to go home with his wife and kids and enjoy his retirement for all of like a year and a half. Because on a random day in 1983, he receives a letter in the mail from the US government informing him that he would not continue to receive his veterans disability benefits from his injuries that he sustained during the war. And Roy's not having it. He goes straight to the media, starts putting out press releases and giving interviews talking about how ridiculous this is and putting political pressure right back on the politicians. And wouldn't you know it, a couple weeks later, the US government comes out with a statement of like, oh hey, we're sorry that we're doing this. We haven't been handling it appropriately. We're going to continue to do it, but we're going to do it in a more humane way for everybody involved. And while I can't prove this, I'm willing to guarantee that Roy Benevidez got the notification of like, oh, sorry you got that letter. Obviously this doesn't apply to such a high profile person that's got enough leverage to be a pain in our ass. Here's your benefits, but we're going to go ahead and fuck everybody else. And Roy wasn't going to allow it. He came out and said that if they can try to do this to him, he can't imagine what...
I was about to say that Roy doesn't feel like somebody who's gonna get pissed off over, like not getting benefits for things like that. Right? He would have tried to like do something else. But he did that because everybody else is getting fucked over. Like that's not happening. Because he's there, he saved everyone. He saw what happened. They were there at the field. And then getting screwed by the politician, yeah, it's gonna piss him off. Like, are you kidding me right now?
They're going to try to do to everybody else. So he keeps fighting for not only himself, but for the other 350,000 veterans that were getting their benefits cut, right? Because they need help too. And Roy's going to help them. So he keeps pushing and putting more pressure on the US government. Basically just comes out and says, hey, the same Ronald Reagan administration that gave me my Medal of Honor is now telling me and a bunch of other veterans that we're not good enough for the benefits that we earned. And with that,
I mean, Reagan, come on, what you expect?
In front of the House Senate committee in charge of this entire operation, and they end up shutting the entire thing down, preserving the benefits for 350,000 veterans. And with that, Roy Benevidez could finally go home, enjoy his retirement, and live happily ever after. So, in conclusion, when somebody needs help, you help them. And
wait a minute, that's the sketch. Look at that. Look at this shit. One arm, that rifle, grabbing other guy, helicopter in the background. Oh, that's so cool.
For the love of God, the fact that somebody renamed Fort Bragg Fort Liberty and not Fort Benevidez instead is borderline criminal. Thank you for watching. Best
Fort Roy, why not?
Buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out. Oh, hey, real quick. If you guys wanted more, there's a book called Legend by Eric Blim, all about Roy Benevidez. The author spent like 3.5 years researching for it, and he actually helped me make this video. So,
Legend.
If you guys wanted to check it out, it's over on Amazon, and I'm sure it's on his website if you wanted to Google it too. I'll have it all linked down below. Thanks for watching.
After that PlayStation comment, I'm taking these back.
Come on. That's not funny. I want those.
No.
They locked me in our staging area, and they started unloading. Started identifying the bodies. They found out I loaded 3 dead enemy soldiers in that helicopter. I didn't want to leave anybody behind. My mission was to recover the classified material, so if anybody had it, he was on the helicopter. They left the 3 enemy soldiers on the side, and because I sort of look Oriental, they thought I was one of them, so they let me lay right next to them. And they were putting us in body bags. And I remember that my feet being lifted, and I was inserted into the body bag, and I could hear that zipper coming up, and I thought, oh my God, no, no. And I couldn't talk because my jaws were locked, and I could hear that zipper coming up, and one of my buddies was doing the Mexican head dance, and he was yelling at the doctor, that's Roy Benevidez. The doctor said, sorry, there's nothing I can do for him. I'll find out later. Jerry Cottenham made that doctor at least to feel my heartbeat. When I felt that hand on my chest, I made the luckiest shot I ever made in my life. I spit in the doctor's face. You know, there's a saying among us veterans, for those that had fought for it, life has a special flavor. The protected will never know. You have never lived till you almost died. And it is us veterans that pray for peace most of all, especially the wounded, because we have to suffer the wounds of war. I'm asked hundreds of times, would you do it over again? In my 25 years in the military, I feel like I've been overpaid for the service to my country. There'll never be enough paper to print the money, nor enough gold in Fort Knox for me to have to keep from doing what I did. I'm proud to be an American, and I'm even prouder that I've earned the privilege to wear the Green Beret. I live by the motto of duty, honor, country. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you. God bless you, and God.
There you go. That was awesome, man. I like he's adding clips like that nowadays in newer videos. Adds more context. Seriously, man. This man basically is standing here after all that shit. Even before he became a Green Beret, he was like done for, right? He's like, screw that, I'm gonna walk. And he walked. He was still carrying those injuries. And after that, all this shit he did, right? Getting stabbed, getting shot in the back, and man, that is so how much his body can take, right? I bet most people can't take half of the things you took, and like body would start to shut down. Body would start to give up. You need certain level of determination and adrenaline and things like that just to carry on, which he did. This is awesome. Right, well, that was real Rambo, Roy Benevidez. He has a book called Legend. Somebody made a book. That's all Hollywood needs. It's a book there. Script is ready before some writer tried to screw with it, but still it's there. Hollywood loves their books, especially the big directors, right? Tarantino and things like that. I don't know. You can make a really well movie. Well, even the name Legend, you can just call that Legend. Make the movie. This feels very Hollywood-esque. You don't even need to create drama. You just tell the story. That's enough. You can like have like any great actors. You can even throw like Brad Pitt and people like that. Why the fuck not? I don't know. Alright, well, if you like my next don't like, subscribe. If you haven't seen the first part, check out the link in the description. I don't know why I'm telling you now. It's like watching first part now would be weird. But check out the link in the description. And yeah, I'll see you next time.